Everyone, welcome to Front Page Bets. Jerry Ahern, Mike Sveditz here for another installment of our Front Page Bet cast. And I tell you what, Jerry, it was a weekend that was full on Easter weekend. We talked about it going into last week. The USFL kicked off. You had the RBC Heritage at Harbortown in South Carolina. NASCAR on Sunday for the first time in a long time, racing on Easter, and the NBA playoffs plus baseball. So a lot of stuff was happening. We're going to recap some of it, but going into the weekend, who would have thought the USFL would have been as popular as it did, at least in the inaugural kickoff of the rebooted league? We remember that back, a long time ago when, well, you were a young man, I was a child, but when the USFL first started, but we talked about ratings were up, even though there weren't a lot of people in the stands, at the old Legion Field, Birmingham, where they're playing all the games, which is something, also want to talk about a little bit, like, how does that work? But the ratings, TV ratings, people watched it. Even my old man was like texting me and saying, like, are you watching this? And I think is it because people just want football, or is it just because it was new? What do you think? Why was the first weekend, especially that game Saturday night, it turned out to be a really good game, Birmingham versus New Jersey, and Birmingham
Right.
wins in the final minute. What is it about the USFL, and can it be sustained through the 10-week season?
It's going to be interesting. I mean, 3 million people watched on Fox and NBC, which blows my mind. I mean, I was watching the Michigan Panthers Houston Gamblers game here at my outpost in Michigan. And, you look at the stands and, there's tumbleweeds blowing through. The folks I was watching the game with were commenting on, does anybody watch this? Well, the answer is yes. And I think it's because people love football, A. And I think the reason that the leagues or the networks are involved with this league is because they need programming, at a time when, the calendar is not quite as stocked with stuff that's going to catch, vast interest. You mentioned baseball, you mentioned golf, but football is king. And I think that's why, it was reflected in those ratings. Looking at the product, first time out, you want to cut them a little bit of slack, pretty sloppy offensively from what I saw in the 2 games that I watched, but, things will get better. And it'll be interesting to see if, as you said, if they can sustain it. My gut tells me no, given the history of spring football leagues in this country. One's failed after the next, but, having that dedicated TV presence from Fox being a partner in the league, I think is a big, big deal.
Well, it's a big deal because, the programming, obviously, in prime time, the way the schedule works out is Saturday night prime time kickoff, and they're trying to do 3 games on Sunday, all at the same stadium. The late game on Sunday got postponed because of weather. It kicked off last night. It played. They've got the time slots. Obviously, Fox can do what they want on their own programming. But I think that, the kind of curiosity about it, is this really going to be, what is it like? I think as much as anything, it's a who's who of who's that. What's that guy? Did he play? He played at college, this college or that college. I remember him from, this league or that league. But I think for me, the intrigue is more of like the rules. Like, how is this really going to shake out? Because you have like the CFL with longer fields, different types of rules, different, motions and things like that. But, and then, the XFL, which was, just completely, I think the most thing that people remember about the XFL is He Hate Me. And other than that, kind of forgettable. The USFL did have some success 30 years ago, but it didn't sustain, like you said. And now the rules, though, are what's intriguing me. Like, so you can, you get your point after attempt, your 2-point conversion. Now you can get a 3-point conversion. And if you want an onside kick, instead of onside kicking it, you can go from 4th and 12 from your own 33. So there's different rules. The overtime rules are actually pretty intriguing. So I think I'm watching because I want to see how exciting that can be, because is that something maybe the NFL will adopt? Doubt it. But is it something that, can move the needle a little bit as far as intrigue? But if the product isn't good, and if the football's not good, it doesn't matter if you end up, what I love about college football is the overtime. When you get there, even a bad college football game can be exciting in overtime because of the way the rules are. you
Yeah.
know.
Well, I
And
mean, Mike, I think he seized on something there. I mean, 3 of the 4 games were within a touchdown, number one. So they held your, interest from that standpoint. There weren't really any blowouts. In the Michigan game, again, that I watched, you had Shea Patterson trying to lead a comeback attempt at the end. Fortunately or unfortunately for the Michigan squad, they couldn't get the snap to him a couple times, and that really kind of killed the drive more than the defense did. But again, competitive game, that's going to hold interest. Rules that lead to some intrigue with, you don't necessarily just have to go for 2, you can go for 3. You don't have to just do an onside kick. You can get a first down, on that 4th down play. Overtime is basically going to play until somebody actually has a sudden death situation. I think after the 3rd overtime, which is preferable to me to than like the college overtime situation, which is just interminable in my opinion. But tight games, and it's football in the spring, and I think people are going to watch until they just think the product is not sufficient to hold their interest.
yeah, and plus what they're doing on the broadcast, opening up the field mics, being able to hear the players more. If you're not used to that, it might be a little distracting. I think it's pretty cool to kind of get inside the huddle. Again, it yet to be determined, but we know here at Front Page Bets, we had a lot of interaction with our stories that we wrote about it. Trying to handicap these games and really kind of do picks and tips is a little bit, kind of difficult in a way, because you're not really sure the players, unless you follow them through college and know. So, and you're not, the league is so new. Access to injuries and things like that might be a little bit more difficult, but I think it's, again, a deal where if you can get some groundswell momentum, you have early success, which the USFL did in the first weekend. I think it's something that'll play out through the season. It's a 10-week season. There's 8 teams. Week like 7 or 8, when they played each other a few times, we'll see how that actually works out and from the competition standpoint. But again, it's football. It is king. We know that. I don't know. The jury's still out after week 1, but if you can, and you're going up against some really, tough from a rating standpoint, depending on what kind of fan you are and what you enjoy to watch. You got the NBA playoffs, you got baseball going, golf on the weekend, during the day, that's Sunday. And if you're a NASCAR fan, so you're really not in the best viewing, when you got a lot of stuff on. But again, if you're not a basketball fan and you're a football fan and you want to watch something on a weekend, that's there for you. So it's an alternative, but not really sure how long, if this will be successful. And if it is successful, how long will it go? And if it's not successful, how long will it go?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if it's not successful, it won't go very long. I think they'll get through the season.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the teams are all playing in the same stadium, which is kind of difficult to maintain fan base interest, it would seem to me. And obviously they're doing that to cut costs and save money, and that makes a lot of sense. They will not be playing their playoffs in the same stadium because the stadium was booked. So they're going to play those in Ohio, which I think is another, I don't think a lot of people are going to be road tripping to the USFL playoffs, but there's not going to be a big economic impact on Canton, Ohio. But, I think it's much more a televised event. And I think he seized on something important too, in terms of, the mic'd up players and coaches and stuff. I mean, you look at the success of like the Manning cast and some of these other like alternative, looks at sports. And I think a generation younger than myself, for sure, is probably more inclined to tune into that type of programming and find it interesting. They're looking for something different and innovative, but ultimately the product on the field has to support that. If it's just crummy football with, tricked up microphones and some goofy rules, I don't think it's going to stick around for a long time.
We've seen that movie before. You know what I mean? We've seen that. So let's move on to the NBA playoffs. After 2 rounds, or first round, but 2 games for some of the series. You had the weekend, 4 games on Saturday, 4 games on Sunday. Favorites on the money line went 7-1. But, it was 2-2 on Sunday against the spread. We had some closer games, Celtics Nets was 1-point game. We could talk about that, Kyrie Irving's return and kind of the drama that surrounded that. With the NBA playoffs going on, looks like the favorites, at least in the first round, as it kind of happens, are starting to pull away. But that one series that could really kind of flip the series, the playoffs on its head is the Nets Celtics, the 7-2. But when you have Irving back and the kind of competition with Kevin Durant, and it raises a little bit more now, even though they're a 7 seed, they've got the talent to maybe make a little run here.
No question. And I mean, that was as entertaining of an NBA game as I've seen in a long time. And Boston Garden was, as the new Boston Garden, TD Garden, was as loud as it's ever been, according to people who were there. 39 points for Kyrie Irving, double birding the fans, some other salty language on the way off. As a native Bostonian, I must say, like, certainly the fans in the stands were giving him the business too, to be equitable. But to have Jason Tatum come down and make that play, blow by Kyrie Irving on that layup as time expired. The TV announcer saying, wait, they're waving it off. And I'm like having a heart attack watching it. And they weren't waving it off. They were seeing if there was any time left after the shot, went through the hoop, but just entertaining stuff. And I mean, NBA playoff basketball, I always find entertaining, and for a lot of reasons. Everybody jokes about the level of defense that's played during the regular season or whatever, but those two teams were just going mano, punch for punch. The Celtics had a 15-point lead in the second half, and the Nets came back mostly behind Kyrie, a little bit from Durant. Durant didn't play great, but he'll get his at some point. That's going to be a hell of a series. The other big storyline to me was Golden State, the way that they played, and particularly playing Steph Curry off the bench. Get 34 points in the Monday night game in 23 minutes, which I think is a record. I mean, the guy is unbelievable. They look unstoppable. I think it would be pretty cool to see like a Celtics Warriors final at some point. I'm getting way ahead of myself, but like those are the two teams that I find the most interesting to watch. Big Draymond Green guy from his Michigan State days, and I love the way he plays the game. Philadelphia looks very strong against Toronto as another team that could make some noise here. But the NBA playoffs, I think, are an underrated, sporting event, pleasure to watch if you're willing to spend the time to do it. And I was glued to my NBA playoffs on Sunday for sure.
We talked last week about how long the playoffs for some of these leagues are, but when you're going back to the product on the court or the field, when it's good, there's nothing better. When it's bad and it's just, feels like it could take a long time, and will this ever end? Going back to Kyrie Irving in that game, and kind of, what I like about the NBA is kind of what a lot of folks, I think, when you're a fan, basketball or not, the passion, the drama, the emotion and all that stuff. And basketball is really one of the only sports where the fans are within arm's reach of the players. And you go back and you talk about Irving, the double bird and the back and forth with the Boston fans, it better than anybody. It's kind of like Philly. I grew up outside of Philadelphia. They boo Santa Claus. So it's the fan base. You understand what's going on, and when you got some interaction, kind of took me back a little bit to the Reggie Miller, Pacers Knicks with Spike Lee. Going back and forth, giving it to him a little bit with
John Starks.
So it kind of takes you back. Has the NBA missed this kind of interaction in the playoffs with the fans? And I'm not saying what Kyrie said or did was appropriate, or I'm not getting into that. But what I'm saying is that when you have fans with that close of proximity in a passionate fan base, and you got a great game going, I kind of like to see it. I kind of like to see that back and forth. Not condoning what they said and what they did.
No, I do too. And I mean, it's the whole hero villain, our guy against your guy mentality. And I think that's what makes sports great. I mean, to me, it's Red Sox, Yankees, it's Celtics, Sixers, it's Celtics, Lakers. I mean, they just made that whole documentary about winning time for the Lakers. And one of my high school classmates, Michael Chiklis, played Red Auerbach in that movie, in case you didn't know. Right. So way to go, Chicky, the commish, making the stage and screen again. But I mean, that's what makes sports great, right? You love your guys and you hate the opposition, and it makes the blood boil a little bit. As long as it's not to the level of disrespect where people are throwing things or endangering players. and the players are being respectful. You don't want to have another Malice at the Palace where you get guys going into the stands. So, it's a little bit of a thin line that you got to try to walk and be cognizant of. But I think what went on in Boston on Sunday, the vulgarity, I'm sure it turned some people off, but like in terms of the spirit of it, generally, I think was on point.
Yeah, and it's interesting because sports are so passionate, and the fan bases and the players, everybody gets into it. But a lot of times in a lot of professional sports, especially major sports, and even in college sports, there's that cooling off period, right? So you get the game ends, everybody goes to their locker room, it kind of cools off, and then they come out to talk to the media. The interactions between the fans as you're walking off a football field, when you have to walk out the tunnel, especially on the road. I was at a game, an Iron Bowl game in Tuscaloosa, Alabama in 2004, where they were throwing, Auburn beats Alabama. They're throwing stuff, bottles, and not even water bottles. I'm talking about Jägermeister bottles, bourbon bottles, throwing it, and we're dodging it as the media going out. Been a part of that, seen that kind of stuff. So like you said, you want to make sure that the players in Irving even said this is like, we're expected to act with respect and decorum and make sure that we're not, crossing a line. But, nobody from a fan perspective, who's policing the fans, right? Who's other than, the authorities. But one of the things that I think is about sports is the passion. And sometimes when you have that cooling off period, it's really good to have that because you don't want to say something or do something in the moment. But when I was talking to Chris Long, a former NFL football player, two-time Super Bowl champion, UVA, University of Virginia standout. He was at Richmond Raceway. We wrote a story last week about it. He was the official pace car driver. And Chris Long was talking about how in NASCAR, really, again, one of the only sports that you're getting interviewed as you're getting in the car to drive off. You're getting interviewed minutes after a big wreck or after somebody just so there's almost like what draws you in as a fan too is kind of just that the curtain being pulled back and actually seeing the passion of these guys and kind of that raw emotion. That's what I like about it. It's I go back to Terrell Owens and how passionate he was celebrating. Some people were turned off and stuff, but that guy was going to celebrate because he was in the moment, just having fun standing on the star, doing all the stuff that he.
That's where Kyrie got the idea to rub his feet on the leprechaun, man. I mean, it's from Terrell Owens.
There's just something about that I'm here for. You know what I mean? I'm not condoning the words or the languages or anything. I'm just saying, like, I love that passion. I've always loved, talking about Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and those guys that are just so they want to win and they would, run over their mother to get that basket or to get that steal. And it's just something about that really resonates. And when you see it in a playoff game, especially a first round playoff game in a 2-7 matchup, I enjoy that.
I mean, he was with the Celtics, 3 or 4 years ago, and the fans haven't forgotten, like that shows the level of passion, the level of interest, the level of just fandom that goes on with these things. And, as you said, and as I said earlier, as long as there's a level of respect, there isn't anyone doing anything illegal, chucking bottles, chucking whatever, and words can be damaging as well, try to, PG-13 it a little bit if you can, but, keeping the fans interested is as much about having those there's a reason there are rivalries, and it's because of that passion and, the level that people actually care about these teams. I mean, it's not just in Boston and New York. It's, as you mentioned, it's in, Auburn, Alabama, and Tuscaloosa, Alabama. It's in Los Angeles, California, and San Francisco, coast to coast. There are rivalries, and there's a reason there are rivalries.
Yep. That's what makes sports great, and I think we'll see that the second game of that series for Boston and Brooklyn is tomorrow night, Wednesday night, if you're watching this during the week. So, it's going to be must-see TV. And again, it's not bad for the game. It's not bad for the game to get people see that. Oh, I gotta see how they're going to react. I
guarantee you, and there's no one in the NBA office that was all that taken aback by what went on. They were probably like, yeah, here we go.
Use it. Let's do it. So, well, Jerry, it's going to be another eventful week. We got baseball, we got NBA playoffs, USFL week 2 coming at you. We got golf. We'll have it all here at Front Page Bets. So stay with us. Jerry, thanks for joining us once again. We'll be back next week to wrap all that up, and stay with us all week here from Page Bets.